Here's every ceasefire deal and prisoner exchange that Hamas has offered Israel since October 7th. October 9th, Hamas offers Israel an unspecified number of women and children being held hostage in Gaza in exchange for 36 Palestinian women and children being held hostage in Israeli prisons. October 16th, a Hamas official says they'd free all Israeli captives in Gaza in exchange for 6,000 Palestinian captives in Israel. October 17th, a Hamas official tells NBC News that they'd release all of their Israeli civilian captives if Israel agreed to stop bombing Gaza. October 28th, Hamas's leader in Gaza offers to release all of the Israeli captives in Gaza in exchange for all of the Palestinian captives in Israeli prisons. This proposal, more commonly known as All for All, was a demand widely adopted by Israelis protesting against Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. January 2nd, Hamas proposed a three-phase deal where Hamas releases 40 Israeli captives in exchange for a gradual withdrawal of Israeli forces from Gaza and the release of Palestinian captives. In the last phase, Israel would end the war and Hamas would release all of its Israeli captives. Israel rejected this offer. January 18th, members of the Israeli government make a proposal to Benjamin Netanyahu to reopen negotiations with Hamas. He refuses. January 22nd, Israel rejects a deal where Hamas would release Israeli captives in exchange for the release of Palestinian captives, a withdrawal of Israeli forces from Gaza, and accepting Hamas's leadership in Gaza. February 7th, Hamas proposes a three-phased 4.5-month ceasefire, where in the first phase, Hamas would release all women, children, ill, and young male Israeli captives in exchange for the release of Palestinian women and children being held captive in Israeli jails. In the second phase, adult male captives on both sides would be exchanged, and then in the third phase, remains of the dead and an end to the war. March 15th, Hamas offers to release Israeli women, children, elderly, and sick captives being held in Gaza in exchange for 700 to 1,000 Palestinian captives in Israeli prisons. And most recently, yesterday, Hamas offered to participate in a proposed three-stage deal where, in the first phase, Hamas would release Israeli female prisoners for 50 Palestinians held in Israeli prisons each. After 11 days of ceasefire, Israel would begin to dismantle its military structures in Gaza. In the second phase, there would be a halt to all military activity in Gaza. And then in the final phase, the war in Israel's blockade on Gaza would end, and the reconstruction process would begin. Israel rejected this deal. Now, you might be saying, well, what about all of Israel's proposals that Hamas turned down? But all of Israel's proposals so far have been for temporary ceasefires. In other words, they would stop the fighting long enough to allow Israel to get its people out and then decimate Gaza without having to worry about killing any Israeli hostages. This is fundamentally different from the ceasefire that Hamas and the vast majority of the world want, which is a permanent ceasefire that would end the war. Now Israel is trying to say that they have no choice but to invade Rafah because Hamas refuses to negotiate. But this is obviously a lie. If Israel really wanted its hostages back, it could have had them back 7 months ago. This was never about hostages. Israel has been relentlessly carpet bombing the very place their hostages are being held and have killed an untold number of them. Israel is actually very clear from day one what this genocidal slaughter was all about. They said they would wipe the Gaza Strip off the face of the earth. They said they would bomb it so badly that Gaza would be a place no human being could exist. This was never about hostages. Hostages were always just their excuse to justify the extermination of a people and destroy its ability to resist.